Welcome. This presentation will focus on autism spectrum disorders and evidence-based practices that you can use to increase social skills in students with autism. Take a look at this picture. You see different sized letters and words. When you first look at it, you see the word autism, right? Some of the letters are large, some of them are small, some have a lot of flowers, some have few flowers. Autism in our children are a lot like this picture. The manifestation of it is very different, but you have to look at a child with autism and think, okay, they have autism, but let me find out what their positive qualities are, and let me find out how I can find those small flowers in them and make them into big flowers. Deficits in social skills are a core component of children with autism and a major source of impairment, regardless of their intellectual ability or the language of the person with ASD. A lot of times we look at our students with autism and we think, oh, he can speak or she can speak, and they're fine. They have social abilities. That's not always the case. A lot of times we see those students that can speak, they're quicker to go be by themselves or regress on certain skills because it's much easier and more comfortable for them to be alone than for them to try to use skills that they don't have. They're going to be in various social situations, and if no one's prepared them for what life can be like in those social situations, they may fail. None of us like to fail, do we? Social interactions, they're fundamental to our everyday life. They're reciprocal. If I have certain social skills and I'm talking to you or looking at you or smiling at you and you never smile back, I'm probably going to quit smiling at you. A lot of times you think about in a relationship, if you're trying to offer your love to someone and you realize they're not loving you back, you're going to stop loving them. That's the same with our students with autism. They may find somebody that they really like, or someone may really like our student with autism, but because they don't reciprocate those feelings and emotions or even greetings, they don't build lasting relationships with those students. We have to remember, very important, that social behaviors are learned. A lot of times we look at our students and we skip over the social behaviors. We look at their academic skills, we look at their hitting, their screaming, because those are all things that bother us or all things that are targeted by their SOLs or whatever. But if we're not looking at those social skills, they're not going to have lasting relationships, and that's what really matters when you go out into the real world. Most people are wired to connect to others and observe so that we can fit in. We naturally imprint our behaviors on someone we admire, we want to be like. So if I see something in you I like, I decide, I'm going to do what she's doing so that people like me too. We watch others and we imitate them, and research has shown we also make decisions on what we don't want to imitate. So if you have a social behavior that I don't like, I may make sure that I don't imitate that behavior. This type of cognition is impaired by our students with autism. They don't have the ability to differentiate what's a skill that I should show, what's the skill that I should not demonstrate. So we have to really help them make those decisions and determine which skills they should display in public, which skills they should display for lasting relationships. Socially, most individuals with autism, they may observe others socially, but not comprehend for the appropriate imitation. So they may not know what your body language is saying to someone else. So when they go to imitate it, it's not showing exactly what they want to show through their body language, or they may not understand body language and physical boundaries. We always see that with a lot of our students with autism, the physical boundaries. Either they want to be too close or they want to be too far away. So we have to teach them what's socially appropriate, because that first interaction with someone physically is how you begin to build those other relationships. And they may have behaviors that interrupt their ability to socialize. If I have various behaviors where I'm hitting myself or I'm swearing or any of those type of behaviors, no one's going to want to hang out with me or be friends with me because those behaviors interfere with our playtime. The results of a lot of these behaviors is our students with autism aren't accepted by their peers. They have challenges in turn taking. They may have problems expressing empathy. A lot of times when you're talking to someone, you want them to empathize with you. Maybe they don't understand your situation, but sometimes a simple head nod or I get you can indicate that they have empathy for you. Some small behaviors like that, when we teach them to our children with autism, may help them to learn to demonstrate socially appropriate behaviors for showing empathy. Our students with autism, they may have anxiety about groups and social situations, thus resulting in them being victim of bullying. Because if they feel like they can't be in certain social situations and be productive and also valued, then individuals will isolate them faster and they'll push them out of various social situations. So we have to make sure we give our students the skills so that they're not bullied, because individuals realize they don't have those skills, but also if they are bullied, they have the skills to speak to someone else and let them know what's going on. So there's a lot to be said about teaching someone social skills. I love this quote from Dave Hamrick, and he said, "Sometimes it was easier to not try." That's what happens with a lot of our students with autism. They try, they fail, and what do? They give up. So especially as they begin to get older into middle and high school, they see somebody, they try to make a friend with them, and then they decide, I'm just going to give up. We don't want that for our students with autism, because as they begin to grow into adolescence and their teenage years and college or career, we really see that those relationships are the #1 impact on their success or their not success. When we're thinking about social behaviors, we really have to differentiate what's social and what's not social. If you think about coughing, if I'm by myself and I cough, that's fine. I cannot cover my mouth. No one knows what you do in private. But the minute I go into a social situation, I begin coughing, what should I do? I should cover my mouth, or the thing these days is put your mouth in your elbow. Whatever you have to do, you want to make sure that that behavior is socially appropriate. So that behavior that isn't always social becomes social. So you have to look at a behavior and decide, how does that influence other people, and how do other people take that social action? That's when a behavior comes social. When we're looking at social behaviors, we said this a few minutes ago, you really have to think about intentional instruction through evidence-based practices. You have to teach behaviors that you want to see increase. So for our students with autism, if we want them to increase their number of trials for math problems, what do? We teach them. We teach them over and over again until they've mastered being able to do 20 math problems without getting any wrong. We have to do the same for social behaviors. We have to teach them over and over again in different situations, different ways. We have to teach them so that they understand them, because if they don't understand them, if they're not able to perform that skill in various situations, we're not going to see that behavior as a success for them. Virginia has adopted 24 evidence-based practices from the National Professional Development Center on Autism. Those evidence-based practices are your golden key to working with our students with autism, because they really give you that guidebook to say all this other stuff that may not be great for our students with autism. There are 24 practices that you know are going to be great for our students with autism. And throughout those evidence-based practices, you can go a little deeper and say, now, which of those are going to be great for exactly what I'm trying to teach my student? There are 11 of the 24 that are recognized to help children ages 3 through 18 that will help them increase their social abilities. Now, when you look at all of these, you think, I can't use all of these. You don't need to use all of them. You have to find out which one is great for that student, because every student won't perform well with each evidence-based practice. You want to make sure that you look at your resources and make sure that you have the specific information that you need to implement the practices. A lot of times we find that we try to implement something and it fails. Well, are you implementing it with fidelity? Are you doing it just as it should be performed? And in a second, I'll show you the NPDC website. You can go to that website and see every step for implementing these evidence-based practices, along with the other 13 that I removed. You look at these evidence-based practices and you say, I don't see applied behavior analysis on there. Well, applied behavior analysis is the foundation of all of the evidence-based practices. The principles of reinforcement and behavior modification are embedded throughout the evidence-based practices. So when you're applying those evidence-based practices, you really want to make sure that, yes, I am using applied behavior analysis. And when you look at the steps for implementation on the NPDC website, you'll be able to see how the applied behavior analysis is embedded in there. I'm going to give you a second to write down this hyperlink. This is a wonderful website, and it's a great resource for anyone who's new to autism or new to evidence-based practices, because you can really begin to form an understanding, or how do students with autism learn? What are the most effective practices for teaching them? And this website, it's filled with resources, so you're not recreating the wheel, and no one likes to recreate the wheel. Every evidence-based practice is not necessarily appropriate for every learner. The practices are most effective when carefully matched to the learner's specific needs and their characteristics. So let's say I've decided I love video modeling. I really do love video modeling. So if I want to implement video modeling, I need to make sure that my student attends to videos, that they enjoy technology, that they'll sit down for longer than 1 second and actually attend to something so that they can learn. If I have a student who has no interest in TV or videos or YouTube or any of that kind of stuff, they're not likely going to attend watching a video model. Now, I may be able to get them up to that skill through using first, visual strategies or other evidence-based practices, and then implement the video modeling, but that's not something that I'm going to want to start with if I realize that they don't attend well. When you look at social skills like any other skill, you want to say, is it a skill acquisition deficit? Does the student not have the skill? They absolutely don't have it no matter what. I've never seen them try to perform it. Or is it a performance deficit, which means the student has the skill but doesn't perform the skill? So you really have to decide which one it is before you decide how you're going to teach it and exactly what you're going to teach. Look at refusal versus inability. A lot of times we assume that our students with autism, they're refusing something. But when you have difficulty or you don't understand, it does cause lack of motivation and refusal, but if you don't have the skill, you can't perform it. So you really have to look at the factors in the environment, look at the skill, and decide, are they able to perform it in this environment? Every skill can't be performed in every environment. A lot of times when we request certain skills to be performed of our students with autism and they don't have the skill, then that will result in a meltdown or behaviors that we don't really want our children to engage in. So we have to make sure that we're not setting them up to fail. We need to give them the tools before we expect them to perform the tools. So, as we begin to dive into the evidence-based practices, here are some of the terms you need to know. The first term is the target behavior or skill. Now, this is the skill or behavior that needs to be increased or decreased. So a target skill can be a positive behavior, such as giving a high five or saying hello. Or it could be a behavior that's non-preferred, such as kicking the chair or spitting or yelling out loud. All of these behaviors can be targeted through the evidence-based practices. Then we move down to our baseline data. You can't find out where you're going if you don't know where you're starting. So you really want to look at the baseline data and observe the learner's behavior prior to beginning the intervention. And when I say intervention, I'm meaning our evidence-based practice. That's your intervention. So you have to decide, where are we now? How many times does he say hello now? How many times does he kick the chair now? So that I can decide if my evidence-based practice that I put into place is really helping that student. And then we're going to look at prompting. This is the help you give to learners to assist them in using specific skills. You want to make sure that you use that word help loosely. You don't want to perform the skill for the student. You want to make sure that you're able to see that they can perform the skill. Task analysis. This is the best way to teach a student with autism, because you're going to break the skill down into smaller steps, and then you're going to increase or decrease the steps over time. You're going to look at specific, observable, and measurable ways to increase those skills, and you're going to look at that student specifically to decide, how do I need to break down this skill? A student may need 10 steps in order to go up to someone and give a greeting, but then there may be another student that only needs that broken down into 3 steps. So you really have to look at that specific student, look at their current baseline data and their skill, and decide, how should I break down this task analysis? Reinforcement. Reinforcement is something that we use every day. What do you offer, or what do you want to give the student or offer them to increase behaviors? You can offer them tangibles. That's something that you give them. You can offer them attention. Do I give you more attention when you perform behaviors that I really like? it really depends on the student and what their needs are. And if you want to learn more about the principles of reinforcement, go back to the NPDC website and you can see the reinforcement procedures listed there step by step on the website. Then we come down to generalization, and this is something that we often forget for our students with autism because they need to be able to perform that skill in a real setting. We can sit here in this room and I can try to show you some of my behaviors. I can show you that I can give a high five, I can say hello, I can smile. I wish I could do a flip across the room, but whatever the skill is, if I can't do it in another setting, then I can't use it. So if you haven't taught me to perform that skill at McDonald's or in the library or wherever the setting may be, I'm not going to generalize it across settings. There's also generalization across people. As teachers, we always get so excited when we can get a student to do something. I got him to give me a high five, or I got him to give me a smile. Well, that's awesome, but how can we teach them to smile at other people or to give other students a high five? That's when we really get into the true essence of teaching, because then they're able to really use that skill. So you really want to focus on how to generalize those skills. We're going to look at peer-mediated instruction and intervention, and mainly because it's shown to have positive effects on academic, interpersonal, and personal social development, and it's one of the largest, most empirically supported type of social interventions for students with ASD. Again, I gave you 11 different strategies that you could use, but you'll have to go to the actual NPDC website to review all of those because we can't do it in 1 hour. Peer-mediated instruction and intervention is one of my favorite evidence-based practices, mainly because it allows students with autism to interact with their peers. A lot of times we think that when we build their social skills and they're interacting with us, that's awesome. It is awesome. It's great that they're performing certain skills, but the majority of time we're with peers that are around our age. Even as we get older, a lot of times we really surround ourselves with peers that are our age. So we really want to help our students with autism develop those type of relationships as well. Peer-mediated instruction and intervention teaches typically developing peers ways to interact and help learners with ASD. And you look at that and you think, the typically developing peers? Yes. For this intervention, you're also going to be teaching the typically developing peers, or the peer with the skills that you want to teach the student with ASD. So you really have to take time and make sure that you're able to teach that other student the skills that you want them to perform when they're with the student with autism. You're going to teach the learners with autism to acquire new social skills by increasing social appropriate opportunities within the natural environments. So in various environments, you can use peer-mediated instruction in the lunchroom, you can use it in the classroom, in the library. With the students that I've used peer-mediated instruction with, we try to start it out in a smaller, quiet environment and then move it to an environment that may be a little more loud or a lot of movement and things like that. So for instance, if we wanted to work on sitting beside a peer and having a conversation at lunch, we may pull those two students and first let them have lunch in my classroom, and then I'm going to take them back into the cafeteria and maybe have them perform the same skill in the cafeteria, because the cafeteria, we all know, is a very loud place, but you can get a lot of social skills in the cafeteria. The peers are systematically taught ways to engage the learners with autism. So you're going to make sure that you give them exact targets and skills that you want them to perform so that they can have the expectations of our students. So the first thing that you have to do is go through and find out what targets and skills you expect from those two students. So peer-mediated instruction and interventions can be implemented with pairs or small groups of learners across the age range. So this is one that is also great because it goes from age 3 to 18. So it's something that's great. And we can probably all attest, we still learn from our peers even when we're older. It's effective in clinical and school-based settings. It's effective in work settings because at work, when you first start a new job, you look at your peers around you and decide, what are they doing? Okay, that's what I'm going to do. They go here for lunch, I'll go there for lunch too. And that's how you learn the socially appropriate behaviors for that setting. You're going to target responding to others, reciprocity, understanding others, and interacting with others in a group. You want to find peers that they like and peers that like them. It's really great to just pick your star student in the classroom. But if your star student has no interest in this student or no interest in helping others, they're probably not going to be the student for you to help implement peer-mediated instruction interventions. So let's look at the actual steps for implementation on the evidence-based practice list. If you go to the NPDC website, there are various things on the page. You can see the brief package, the brief components, the overview, evidence-based, step-by-step instruction, implementation checklist, and data collection form. I really encourage you to go to the website and check out every package on there because it's some great information, and also they've already done all the work. They've done all the resources, all the references. So if you decide you want to implement peer-mediated instruction intervention, you can go directly to the website and find more resources that will help you implement it. For this, we're going to look at the step-by-step instructions because that's what we would look at if we decided to implement this evidence-based practice. If you look at this list, this is right from the website. One of the first steps is selecting the peers. Now, if you want them to find a peer, just watch them throughout the day. So watch who they interact with naturally, who looks at them or who tries to tap them on the shoulder, or who do they smile at or grab at, or what type of things do they do with other students in the hallway, in the lunchroom, even in their very classroom. So those are going to be our students that we target because we already see that there's some type of maybe nonverbal relationship going on with them. They may look at them a certain way, or if it's a student that helps them in the hallway, that's going to be the student that you want to target for your intervention. So then, once you've selected your peers and you see that they have the good skills that you're looking for to teach your child with autism, then you're going to want to teach that peer. You have to train the peers, and that's an important step that goes back to that fidelity that we talked about. If you follow the steps for implementation, you're really going to see success with these evidence-based practices. So once you train this student without autism, you're going to go on through the next steps of the implementation. If you go to the website, you can see all of the steps for implementation. Another great thing about the website is they have data sheets for you. So you're going to try to take your baseline data first. Remember, you don't know where you're going unless you know where you're coming from. So first we have to decide, where did we start? How do they get his needs met now? Do they do that through verbal interactions? Do they do that through touching someone? How do they get their needs met now? And what type of tools do we need to give them to be successful? Because in order for them to have a social interaction, we may have to first help them have some language or teach the typical peer how to understand how they use their picture book or how they use their voice output device. So all those type of things have to be taken into consideration when you're beginning to implement the program. Another great resource that has just been a great tool in a lot of schools across Virginia and across the nation is the AIMS modules. And these are training modules to assist you with implementation, and I direct you to this website. And when you go there, you go to the modules list, and you can see there are about 41 modules that are listed to help you learn to implement evidence-based practices and to help you learn from various experts across the U.S. How students with autism learn. So for instance, the peer-mediated instruction and intervention, there's an entire module online that can help you learn to implement that. They have videos embedded on there. They use the exact steps for implementation that come from the NPDC website. So it's a really great tool, and I urge you to go there. It's absolutely free. So once you go on there and you sign up for it, create yourself an account, it's absolutely free and a great resource for you to share with others. We want to make sure that as we're targeting skills for our students with autism, that the skills are age appropriate, which are valuable to their peers and others around their age. We want to make sure we're teaching them those type of skills that they're going to need to have successful relationships. Because if we think about why we're teaching social skills need to move forward to social competence. So you begin with just those basic greetings of hello, how are you, and high five and all that kind of stuff. But then you move towards playing together and actually having social interactions. And that's really where we want our students to move towards and go beyond those basic social skills. So if you look at students who are age 4 through 7, Some of the social expectations they have of their peers is they want to play with them, and they want you to share and care about them, or play dress up, or hug each other. So those are things that their peers are going to expect for them. So when you're teaching them social situations or social skills, these are the type of settings you're going to teach them in. You want to teach them while playing how to have a social interaction. You want to teach them how to share. That's a social interaction. Because if you're with someone who never shares and always hogs the one Thomas tank engine in the classroom, then no one's going to want to play with you, or they're going to take the Thomas before you get there. Ages 8 through 10. Your peers are looking that you're able to be nice and trustworthy and playing with them and helping each other and, again, sharing. So a lot of these foundational skills that you start teaching when a child is a toddler, they move on to middle school and elementary school, and really help those children have successful relationships. As you move up to 11 to 15, your peers want you to be respectful and trustworthy, funny, cool, and nice. And a lot of times you wonder, how can you define respectful? You can't define that, because what's respectful to one person may not be respectful to another. But if you work with students and teach them some of the skills they need to demonstrate respect, then they'll be able to exhibit those in various situations. Respect could be something as simple as holding the door. How many times do you make eye contact with somebody because they hold the door for you and you say, "Thank you," if you have good social skills? How many times have you held the door for someone and they just walk through and you look back and you say, "Well, you're welcome," because you realize that they don't have the social skills to say thank you for you holding the door for them. Age 16 through 18 and moving into college, you want your friends to be trustworthy and have similar interests as you and listen to things and be dependable and fun and just kind. When you're looking at the similar interests, that's something that's so important for our students with autism as they begin to move into later adulthood and adolescence even, because they oftentimes don't have similar interests as some of their peers. So sometimes we need to create those or introduce them to various things so that they can have things to talk about. Because if my favorite thing is strawberry shortcake and I'm in college, that's going to be hard for me to find another person on campus who wants to talk about strawberry shortcake. The same with a lot of the doors and things like that. So you find strategic ways to try to introduce and create interest to other things that are age appropriate for our students. That's to help them have peer valid social skills, because we think we're cool, but we're really not that cool, especially to middle and high school students. We're not that cool. So go to the peers and find out, what type of things are you guys interested in? What are you playing with these days? What are you watching on TV? All those type of things are going to be things that you can try to introduce to your students, and perhaps they'll find interest in one of them, or even they'll engage with them just to, receive some type of reinforcement. So make sure you're consulting with peers and getting input on goals and priorities that you want to teach. Those peers around your students in the general ed classroom, or those typical developing peers, as we say, are going to be a great resource for you when you're trying to build social skills in our students with autism. Going back to the evidence-based practices, there's a long list of them, and I want to emphasize with you as much as possible. Make sure that you go to the NPDC website and see what type of students these are best for, so that you're implementing something that's going to be great for that student, because it takes a lot of time to implement an evidence-based practice with fidelity. And I don't want to encourage you to waste your time or spend time implementing something that you're going to have to go back and redo. There will be times that you'll try things and it won't go the way that you want it to go. Like the peer-mediated instruction intervention may not be successful initially, but if you pair some of the evidence-based practices with another evidence-based practice, you can be more successful. If I find a student who loves visual supports, I could use visual supports to teach them how to interact with their peers. So that's just one example of how you can pair evidence-based practices. If I have a student who is not really thrilled on the situation of interacting with their peers, but they love to look at their iPad and look at videos, so maybe I create some video models of peers interacting, and then I show them that example, and then I take them into the setting and actually expect them to interact with their peers. So you can find different ways to use 1, 2, 3 evidence-based practices to help our students be more successful. You want to match the social interaction programs to the students' needs and the settings. You don't want to expect them to order a cup of coffee in the cafeteria. They need to go to Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's to order a cup of coffee. So teach them those skills that they need in the environment that they're going to use them, because then they'll be more likely to learn them and generalize them and actually use them. Socially competent students and children differ in many ways. Schools and classrooms, they can vary in various circumstances and with various needs. So you really have to look at what's the circumstance, what are their needs, how do I target? You want to establish reasonable social interactions. I can't expect that today you sit in a corner, you don't speak to anyone, and tomorrow you're going to be in the cafeteria socializing with 3 people at one time. That's going to overwhelm anybody and make them shut down, and then we're going to have a hard time even getting you back into the cafeteria. So we really have to have reasonable expectations, and go back to that one slide when we talked about task analysis. What are the step-by-step instructions that we need to provide for this student to get them to the level that they need to get to? And we have to be sensitive to local social interaction norms and conditions. A lot of times with our students, we may not know what their social norms are at home, in their culture. We have to make sure we talk to parents, so that there may be a social expectation we're placing on our student that just is not a norm for them. And so we expect them to perform it, but there's no way for them to generalize it or practice it in other environments at home. So talk to parents and others around the students to determine what are the norms for this student, what are the norms for their culture, for them to for social interactions. Program for interaction quality as well as quantity. I don't want you high-fiving every single child in the hallway, because half of those students aren't even going to recognize you or make eye contact with you. I really want to look for quality relationships. If we think about to ourselves, think back to you. How many really good friends do you have that you're able to depend on, always? It's probably not that many. You can probably get them all on one hand. But with our students with autism, we want them to be friends with every single person in the school. That's not the case. If we can build them a social interaction and a friendship or a relationship with one student, they now have almost as many as I have. So you really want to make sure that you're looking at the quality as opposed to quantity. Select the peers carefully. I can't emphasize this enough, because you don't want to select those peers that has behaviors that you're not excited about, or that student who's being sent into your room because they have behaviors in another room. You want to make sure you're selecting peers of great quality. Not to say some of those students that have behaviors, they can really turn it around when they're put in a position to be a role model for other students. But you want to make sure that that's the case prior to you putting them with that student, because that student is now in a situation where they're a peer model for that student with autism. And in the hallway, no matter what they're doing, that student with autism is now going to look at that student as a model. So you want to make sure that you select peers very carefully. Reduce the problem behaviors in advance. You have to make sure that you get all of the behaviors down as low as possible that could interfere with social interactions. If I'm constantly hitting or kicking or screaming, I'm not going to be able to have a social interaction with anyone. Provide ongoing support and monitoring. Once you teach a skill, you have to continue to teach that skill or expect that skill so that you can maintain it. The reason that we lose a lot of the skills that we learn in middle school and high school and even college in regard to academics is because we don't maintain them. We don't use them ever again. So with students with autism, if there's social skills that you're teaching them, you want to try to maintain them. Expect them often. Once a child has learned to greet you when they walk in your door, that's the expectation every day. You don't allow them to go weeks and weeks without displaying that expectation, then all of a sudden decide, oh, I want you to speak to me today. That's going to be hard because I haven't used that skill in a month. So you really want to make sure that you're continuing to support them and monitoring them to see if they're able to display those skills. Remember to task analyze the social interaction skills. They're just like academic skills. You have to teach them. You have to break them down into small steps and perhaps teach them in different ways. Just as you differentiate for academic skills, you want to differentiate for social skills. Again, go back to your data. You want to take data before, you want to take data after, and decide, how's the skill going? Are they actually making progress, or do I need to go back to the drawing board and select a different evidence-based practice? Those problem behaviors, I can't emphasize it enough, have to be reduced first. Until you reduce those problem behaviors, you're really going to have a hard time with teaching a child any other skills. If I'm constantly having my hands in front of my face, or I'm moving, or I can't be still, it's going to be really hard to get me to sit down and shake someone's hand, or sit down and make eye contact with someone. So the first thing you have to do is get those problem behaviors out of the way that are interfering, because they can be just like this, a big problem in the way. People with strong social skills often have more meaningful relationships, and they're happier and have greater self-esteem. One of the things you always think about when you go somewhere new, or when you change jobs or move, or who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to hang out with? What type of things am I going to do? So that's the same with our students with autism, is we want them to have someone to hang out with, something to do. We want to make sure that we're helping them have greater happiness and greater self-esteem. They have desire to participate in social situations. A lot of times they just don't have the skill. Some of our students do. We have students on both sides of the spectrum. Some have a lot of social skills and may want to be very social, but a greater portion of them don't have those social skills. So we have to look at that student and determine, do they not have the skill and truly want friendships and relationships, and how can I give them an overall better quality of life? I love this cartoon because that's what we do a lot of times with our students in special education in general, with all types of disabilities. We put big expectations in place for them, and then they get left behind. We don't want to leave our students with autism behind when it comes to social skills. That's going to help them really build social relationships and move on to just a greater place in life with their self-esteem and their self-awareness. So social skills are something that's so important to target for our students with autism. So don't miss the boat with your students with autism. These are the references I used. Thank you so much for joining me for this webcast, especially for a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I encourage you to continue working with our students with autism and trying to increase their social skills. There's a great resource attached. Download that resource and decide how you can use it when you begin to implement social skills for your students with autism. Also, I'm going to be available after this presentation on the web board so that you can ask questions, and I'll get back to you with the answers.